Welcome everyone to the East Fort Worth Business Association April meeting, but really a special meeting as we hold our first ever virtual mayoral candidates forum. The webinar format is a little new to us. We're going to work through that together, but we're going to have a great conversation with leading candidates for the mayoral race. And so we're so appreciative of them being with us. Thank y'all for taking time out to be an attendee. And we've got a good group that's continuing to grow. And we're going to spend about 90 minutes with these candidates. And I want to say to our candidates that are here today, thank you for not just for your time today, but the commitment you made over the last several weeks and months, the time you're going to commit in the coming weeks and months. Win or lose, the time and your love for Fort Worth shines through, and we appreciate all that. And thanks for spending a little bit of that marathon with us today. We've got a great group that put our forum together today. Linda Fulmer, who you'll hear a lot from today, has done a yeoman's work on this. She's been supported by Don Boren, Wanda Conlon, and Mike Wisenan to make sure we bring you a quality time with these candidates today. We're gonna skip many of our normal processes for the association's membership meetings because we want to focus on the candidates today. But one thing we're not gonna skip is our prayer and pledge. And so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to the lovely and talented past president, past everything for the association, Wanda Conlon.
My goodness, I don't know if I can follow that. If you would, bow with me, please. Almighty God, creator of all good things, we come to you today, each in our own way, asking for your blessing on this gathering. Help us to listen respectfully as the candidates share their message with us. Help us to make final decisions based on rational consideration. We come to you with gratitude for the blessing of living in the greatest country in the world. We come to you asking for the strength of leadership for East Fort Worth Business Association, which will help us make our community as good as it can be. And finally, Almighty God, we come today asking you to have mercy on us all as we make our way through this turbulent and chaotic time. Amen. And now, if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance with your hand over your heart, please. The flag looks beautiful. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. President.
Thank you, Wanda. And now, our host for today, Linda Fulmer. Linda, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. As you know, I'm Linda Fulmer, and I'll serve as the moderator for today's forum. But first, I'll give you just a little bit of information. To help with the sound challenges in the virtual format, we are asking all of the panelists to please stay on mute, except when it's your turn to speak. For the attendees, if you have questions you would like to ask the candidates, please post these in the Q&A. We do not expect to have time to answer many of those questions live today, but regardless, we will compile those and send them to the candidates for a written response after today's forum, because we do have a pretty packed agenda. Now, the format we're going to follow today will begin by having each candidate make a 1-minute opening statement. After that, we'll have 2 rounds of questions where they will each have 2 minutes to respond. And then we'll have a 3rd round of questions that will have a 1-minute response, followed by a 1-minute summary address from each candidate. So as you can imagine, having that many rounds for people to speak, it's going to be pretty packed to get it into this 1.5 minutes. We will have a countdown timer that will be displayed so the candidates can keep track of their time, but I'd like to ask each of you who's a candidate to keep this in mind. A good response is completed by the time the timer hits 0. A great response is completed before the timer hits 0. So I'd like to encourage all of you to aspire for greatness. So let us begin with the opening remarks.
Quickly, I'm having trouble with the timer. So Roman, do you have it up?
I'll get that open.
Okay.
It's not working
I
for me.
actually addressed that in the Q&A.
Okay, so let me know when you're ready with the timer.
Go ahead, Linda, I've got it.
Okay, so we'll start with Dr. Brian Bryd for his 1-minute opening remarks. Dr. Bryd, your time starts now.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, everybody, for putting this together and for having me on. It's good to see everybody and our fellow candidates who we're getting to see each other a lot lately. Quickly, my story. I grew up here in Fort Worth. My parents were business folks. I did the medicine route, but ended up back in business and in hospice care, just because I love hospice care so much. I've divested from that, and I've been in full-time public service for about 4 years. I spent a whole lot of my time in the Las Vegas Trail area in the west side of town, which is the district that I have the honor of representing on city council. Looking forward to the discussions about the east side. I'll tell you, an area gets better when people are advocating for it, as you guys are. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bryd. Next, we'll hear from Mr. D.C. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, your time starts now.
Good afternoon. I'm DC. I completed my undergraduate degree in civil engineering from Texas A&M and later went to law school at Texas Southern University's Thurgood Marshall School of Law. I am running primarily on the values of citizenship and service that I was taught as an Eagle Scout, but I have several reasons for running, and I would appreciate your support as I try to identify areas where we can bring the city together. I know in East Fort Worth, there are neighborhoods that are relatively isolated from the rest of the cities, and I'd like to build bridges there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Mattie Parker. Ms. Parker, your time starts now.
Hi, everybody. Wonderful to see you. Thanks for taking the time to host us today. As Brian attested, we were seeing lots of each other. Enjoyed these forums across Fort Worth. So I was born in Austin and then moved to Hico, where I was raised on my family's farm there. My husband and I moved to Fort Worth about 14 years ago. We have 3 beautiful children, 19, 10, and 4. I've had the pleasure of working behind the scenes, state, federal, and local public service for 17 years. I'm a licensed attorney, practiced law here, was chief of staff for mayor and council for 5 years, and most recently founded the Tarrant 2 and 3 partnership focused on post-secondary education for our students. As we had the opportunity to tell you what our plans are specifically for East Fort Worth, it's really across the entire city, focused on safe neighborhoods, on economic development that works both for small business and for large corporate relocation. But most importantly, being focused on solutions-oriented leadership that unites this community. I want us to prove across the country that is very divided right now what it looks like to work together in Fort Worth, Texas. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Next, Ms. Peoples, it's your turn. Your time starts now.
So I'm home. I'm an East Sider, and so this gives me a lot of pleasure today. I moved to Fort Worth in 1975, and my job with AT&T took me away. But when I retired in 2012, I knew where I wanted to be. That was back in Fort Worth, Texas, but more importantly, it was back on the east side of Fort Worth, Texas. And even though people told me, don't live on the east side, I know what a treasure the east side is, and I know what it can do for this city. And so this is where I planted my flag, and I intend to be for the rest of my life. And so I know that when all boats rise, we all rise. And when we make sure that every community gets all those economic opportunities, good housing, good leadership, then we all benefit. And that's why I'm running for mayor of the city of Fort Worth.
Thank you, Ms. Peoples. And now we'll hear opening remarks from Ms. Ann Zadeh. Ms. Zadeh, your time starts now.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Ann Zadeh, and I serve on the Fort Worth City Council representing District 9 presently. I've done that for the last 7 years, and before that, I served on the Zoning Commission. My background in education, I think, is a very strong foundation for service at the city level. I have a master's degree in city and regional planning and an undergraduate degree in environmental studies. I started my life in Fort Worth on the east side. My husband and I, when we first got married, lived off of East Chase, and my first job as a city planning consultant was in Handley. So that was my first home in the city of Fort Worth, and I consider the entire city my home. I served at the local level, as you all do, and that's a very important foundation for service going forward, and I will access that and support that in all of my service for the community of Fort Worth, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Ms. Zadeh. We'll now begin our first round of questions where each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. And how we're doing this is a few weeks ago, we asked each candidate to submit a written response to the following question. The city of Fort Worth has recently acknowledged that historically they have favored parts of the city west of I-35W, and the mayor and city manager have vowed to change that. How do you see this happening in a practical way in East Fort Worth, and how would you improve the city's focus and investment in East Fort Worth? We sent this question out to everyone who had filed to run for mayor, and we told everybody, we'll give you about 2 weeks to respond, but if we don't have your written response by March 5th, you will forfeit your position on this forum. Out of the 10 candidates we sent the question to, 6 responded by the deadline, and we have 5 of those candidates here today. So the first round of questions will follow up on the written responses that we received from each candidate. And so once again, we'll give you 2 minutes to respond, but if you want to really stand out in a good way, see if you can wrap your response before the 2 minutes is over. And for this round, we'll begin with Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, in your written response, you spoke about a number of bridges and road extensions to improve mobility. Going beyond mobility, what other specific actions would you take as mayor to raise up East Fort Worth in terms of the city's focus and investment? Mr. Caldwell, your time starts now.
I have had this discussion in other forums that something that I agree with Ms. Peoples on is that there should be more grocery store shopping options in that area. I reached out to the H-E-B corporate chain and asked them to relocate a store, or not relocate, but open a store here in Fort Worth, because they do have a presence and contribute to local economies across the state, but not here, which is kind of discouraging. I would like to amend my answer to say that we don't need service road on the north side of I-30 between Beach and Bryd Street, because that would, well, we don't have space for it with the Trinity River there. On the south side, however, that would be a connection that could help with getting commercial or multi-unit housing construction on the south side of I-30. Basically, that's kind of a zoning issue. There are large plots of land in East Fort Worth that we can't use because we can't even get to them. That's why I want to increase mobility. Yes, we can focus on zoning to increase the available uses of land in order to get development there, but primarily access is where I see the biggest defect and key to improvement.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Next, we will hear from Ms. Parker. Ms. Parker, in your written response to our question, you spoke of a need for more action and less talking, with a focus on themes of economic development and job growth, infrastructure, and education. How would you assure that people with power and influence in other geographic sections of Fort Worth do not overpower any efforts you would make to implement your proposed strategies in East Fort Worth?
Well, I think fortunately, because of organizations like East Fort Worth Business Association, Southeast Inc., the right leadership structure is already in place to ensure that East Fort Worth and those that live there and have grown their businesses there remain in charge, so to speak. That your organization continues to dictate which direction we want to go, but importantly, sitting down with folks like you, the people that are on this call that care enough to say, what resources do you need from the city, but also from private sector. So if you look at, let's take education, I'll go backwards first. So education specifically, we know that this organization in particular doesn't control education, but you all are concerned about how we're training the talent of tomorrow. I think nonprofits like the one I'm leading is just one small example of many other organizations. Obviously, Clayton Yes is included here today, and I've worked with Jason before, making sure that all those organizations are rowing in the same direction, focus on what it looks like to reinvest in talent that sit in classrooms today. Because I can tell you, in East Fort Worth right now, there are several high schools where before COVID, the last benchmark data, only 10% of your students were graduating college, career, military ready. That won't work for East Fort Worth. When it takes to economic development, I've talked to business leaders right now that are absolutely excited about the opportunity to invest in East Fort Worth and grow jobs and grow business there. We're not marketing it correctly. And I don't think that's that no one's going to get pushed out of the way. It's more about working together on what kind of investment we need to see in East Fort Worth and prioritizing based on the residents that actually live there. And second is infrastructure. We know that right now with the Biden administration is looking at $2 trillion. What are the projects that are shovel ready specific to East Fort Worth? And then not just thinking above ground, we also need to think about community Wi-Fi. Those are great equalizers across the community that we have to continue to invest in. Thanks to the city council and city staff that prioritize that with CARES Act funding. What can we do to continue those projects? But again, allowing businesses associations like this one to continue in a leadership capacity.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Peoples. Ms. Peoples, in your written response, you spoke of a need for new housing and better retail, especially grocery stores. Given that grocery store corporations have failed to respond to existing economic incentives, encouraging them to move into areas like ours, how would you go about bringing those in?
So Linda, it's not just grocery stores, it's going to be businesses. So I want to point to something that's been very successful in this city. I want to talk about what the near South Side has done, and that's what I want the East Side to do. They have reinvented Magnolia Street. And so when I look at East Fort Worth, and when I lived here many years ago, Lancaster was this thriving, incredible artery in East Fort Worth. And so what has happened over time is we've seen Lancaster fallen to decline. We need to reinvent and revitalize Lancaster. We need to bring new businesses back here. And once you start that core and you get it working, then people will want to come. I talked about housing, but all of these things tie in together. Once we go to a big box store, a big grocery store, and we work with them to get them here, and then we start surrounding them with smaller, more successful businesses that are owned by many of you on this call, then we start to bring a neighborhood back alive. And then once you get that anchor, those good stores, those good small businesses there, then people want to live in that area. And so I have a whole plan around reviving our community. This is my community. I live there. I drive to Lancaster every day, and what I see does not make me happy. And so I'm going to focus on that revitalization, working with all of you all to put together a plan to revive our community.
Thank you, Ms.
I tried to be succinct.
You did well. You did well. Okay, next we'll hear from Ms. Zadeh. Ms. Zadeh, in your written response, you spoke of the history of underinvestment and disinvestment on our side of town and the need to equalize delivery of city services based on data and need, along with the need for added investments to allow historically underserved areas to catch up. How would you garner support from the majority of City Council to support investment in neighborhoods that have to support neighborhood investment to rectify historical inequities? Your time starts now.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I think that we have seen great success in the programs that we've done to invest in those neighborhoods already. But like I said, those investments need to be accelerated because we are not going to get the neighborhoods that have been underinvested in caught up in a timely enough fashion. I have in District 9 experienced the very thing that you're talking about. The District 9 has many neighborhoods that have gotten the benefit of that squeaky wheel gets the grease response that the city has often responded to over many, many years. And I also have neighborhoods that have not benefited from that squeaky wheel gets the grease. So that shift has literally been happening in District 9, where we have to communicate with folks why the investment in the entire city and in areas that were underinvested in the past will benefit them as well, so that they're not fighting against the right thing to do. So we have done that in District 9. There were folks that were asking me to advocate for neighborhoods in District 9 to get those dollars and investments as we put those investments into the Stop 6 area, into Ash Crescent, into the north side, and then finally into Rosemont. But basing that on the data and the making sure that we're catching people up, that has been a persuasive argument for folks, because everyone wants to see our entire community thrive and do better. And so making sure that you're explaining the reasoning behind this and the underinvestments that have happened in the past and the return on investment that will occur when those dollars are spent in those communities is a way to ensure that we continue on the right path and don't revert back to the squeaky wheel gets the grease delivery system, which has left communities behind.
Thank you, Ms. Zadeh. Finally, we'll hear from Dr. Bryd. Dr. Bryd, in your written response, you mentioned a number of our assets over here, including areas that could be candidates for promotion of mixed use, office, retail, and urban residential development, and how, as mayor, the mayor has the ability and the clout to shine a light on the East Fort Worth opportunities. Can you be more specific about how you would go about doing this, and what measures would you use to gauge the effectiveness of your efforts? Your time starts.
Thanks, Linda. Well, so the first thing I would say, generally speaking, is that decision makers need data, whether those are decision makers in the business community that we're deliberately going to and asking to take a look at the east side. If we back up from that, there's not one mayoral candidate on this call who really knows the entire city. We're over 300 square miles, and it's just it's a tremendous task to get to know it. I think we're all working on that right now. But it brings up the important point that the next mayor has to spend a lot of windshield time laying eyes on and getting to know the areas and listening to folks. And specifically on the east side, getting to know what's already gone on that's working at Oakland Corners or on East Chase Parkway, and what is happening that hasn't worked real well on Lancaster, where when I look at it, I see a whole lot of businesses that they're okay, but they're not quite the businesses that we really want to see right there. We need to identify areas of opportunity by listening to leaders in your organization, for instance, and other people who live there, and business leaders. And then the mayor can shine a light on things. And when we have the kind of data that shows, for example, how much disposable income is there, right? So we can show CEOs and people who are making decisions on whether or not they're going to invest in an area and try to make profit, that they can make a profit there. So anyhow, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Bryd. This concludes the first round of questions. For the second round, we have a number of questions that represent common themes that come up when we get together in our various associations and meetings to talk about East Fort Worth. And so we've randomly assigned these questions to each candidate. However, I would encourage each of you to listen to all of the questions, because if you're talking to other neighborhoods or people over here, you may get these same questions. So for this round, we again have up to 2 minutes per candidate. And for this round, we'll begin with Ms. Parker. Ms. Parker, is there a project or initiative you've seen in another area that you would push to happen in East Fort Worth? If so, could you please describe it and why it fits in East Fort Worth? And your time starts now.
I think one great example is the work that Near Southside has completed using TIF dollars on South Main. So when you think about public infrastructure investment and what will spur private investment, and importantly, when the private sector works with community, in this case, working with Councilwoman Zadeh, working with mayor and council, working with city staff, working with multiple partners, to not only reinvest and redevelop a fantastic area of the city, but importantly, hold on to the history, preserve buildings, reinvent. I think East Fort Worth is a prime example. Let's take East Lancaster, for instance. If you think about potential for future projects like Lancaster BRT that everybody's considering on what the best mechanism is to redevelop Lancaster, if you take that same mindset of real public investment on a major corridor in East Fort Worth and what is possible, I think this community should absolutely look to Near Southside as an example. And fortunately for us, we know within their catchment area of the TIF and the area they work in, they're already working with many of you as partners because of the Evans-Rosedale project, right? So maybe you apply that same opportunity that happened on South Main to Evans and Rosedale with the development there that's partnership with the city. I really think the possibilities are endless, but we know in Fort Worth what we do well is private-public partnership. And when we stray away from that, we get into trouble. And I think what East Fort Worth has been screaming for attention is where is the public investment that truly will spur private sector opportunity and growth. And importantly, making sure we partner with those of you that are on this call today that understand what you want to see in East Fort Worth. And I think this organization could absolutely be the premier person at the table to make sure that happens.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Peoples. And so get ready. Ms. Peoples. Mayor Price has spent considerable time focusing on education while she's been mayor. Will you have an area of focus along those lines that is less directly connected to city services, but yet contributes to the health and vitality of East Fort Worth? If so, what will that be and how will it contribute over here?
So I think you know I love education, but more than I love education and am involved in education, I love art. And let me tell you why I want to be the arts mayor and what that means for us in East Fort Worth and means for Fort Worth at large. We are a city, and I have talked to, the Fort Worth Visitors and Conventions Bureau. What is one of the #1 things that generates revenue in this city? It's tourism. And people want to come here, but you know where they want to go? They want to go to the stockyards. So they go to the north side to see the stockyards. They want to go to the museum. So they go to the west side. But we have started something here in Fort Worth we have started painting these amazing murals and public art projects that are around the city. I think once you start bringing people in to things and you encourage tourism in all of the city, we generate revenue. Because what do people do? They stay in hotels, they eat at restaurants. It for us can be a great equalizer when we talk about increasing more tax dollars. So yes, I love education, but I also love art education. And I think once we focus on that, not only does it, appeal to people's creative instincts and it brings beauty to an underserved area. I love seeing the public art because we maintain it, we keep it looking good, but it also brings tourism and it brings dollars to that area. And so that is one of my primary focuses. And I love to tell people, I live on the east side because of the beauty of the east side, the greenery, the vegetation. We're just going to make it better and better and better with public art.
Thank you, Ms. Peoples. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Zadeh. Ms. Zadeh, traditional solutions are not likely to make a meaningful impact on East Fort Worth in the near future. So what out-of-box idea would you champion for East Fort Worth to make meaningful progress in the short term? And your time starts now.
So I appreciate it. I first want to start off by saying that I really appreciate that every single candidate so far has pointed to something that has been done in District 9, which I have had the honor of helping champion in the last 7 years. So I love all those examples that have been successful in District 9, and I believe that those that effort and energy can be spread across the city. And even in the work that done in District 9 on those initiatives, they have gone beyond the boundaries of District 9. So I think that's all a really great example of initiatives and things that we have been successful with, the Near South Side and all of that. I also, the bringing up of Visit Fort Worth and the Arts Council and Near South Side Inc., I have been intimately involved with all of those organizations and the work that they have done across the entire city. And I believe bringing that focus to East Fort Worth, bringing those organizations and those partnerships to East Fort Worth and communities across the entire city is a way forward to spark and encourage and grow the initiatives that have started. Specifically, what I think is going to be a very big spark is the initiatives along East Lancaster and bringing all those stakeholders together, looking at that BRT with the partnership with Trinity Metro and looking at all the stakeholders along that corridor to bring the economic revitalization that will occur along that corridor. As it has been pointed out, the East Side is a beautiful place. It is treed massively. The Boulevard of East Lancaster is a beautiful boulevard, and with the reinvestment in the business along that corridor, with the way to get through there with mobility, bringing the BRT, all of those things will spark and enhance and grow that area. And as others have pointed out, someone waking up every day in your community and thinking about what is in the best interest of that area is what is needed. And you have that in spades. You just need us to partner along with you and bring the resources that the city has available to keep that going.
Thank you, Ms. Zadeh. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Bryd. Dr. Bryd, do you think that East Fort Worth should receive compensatory support or services for the centralization of homeless services? If so, what services and support would you advocate for East Fort Worth to mitigate the impact of negative impression of the concentration of homelessness creates for the neighborhoods and businesses near the shelter? Your time starts.
Linda, when I talk to folks who are trying to run businesses on the East Side, this comes up every single time. And it's, Brian, you know, there's this penumbra, there's this area around the homeless shelters where folks wander from, and it makes it very difficult to do any kind of business. I would feel the same way if I was attempting to open up a retail shop. My customers would want to be able to come in there and they want things clean, we want things safe. You know, we should shoot for that. Just look at cities like Austin or Los Angeles that are dealing with a significant uptick in homelessness and how difficult it is for their business owners to run. Well, one of the ideas that I've heard that I believe the city can have a significant impact on is, let's work on an industrial buffer in between the homeless shelter area and businesses to the east of that, because these non-retail businesses aren't as disaffected by the homeless shelters and the penumbra of homeless folks around there. As it relates to homelessness, I still have 44 seconds. As it relates to homelessness, you know, we always need to be working with our housing authority and other housing folks to push more affordable housing and put downward pressure on homelessness. We need to be working with Peter Smith and with MHMR. There's some new medications that can address some of the mental health issues that are tied into homelessness that are a shot, and that medication lasts for a month or 3 months, and it addresses the medication non-compliance issue. And so, Linda, those are a few thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bryd. Finally, for this round, we'll hear from Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, across Fort Worth, we have seen redevelopment of blighted communities occur in a way that makes those neighborhoods inaccessible to existing residents. An example includes the Linwood neighborhood and the West 7th Street development. What strategies would you recommend to assure that as various parts of East Fort Worth are redeveloped, the community remains accessible to those of us who've called it home for so many years? And your time starts now.
So you may recall in my response to your original question that I focused on mobility and access. I do see that in the bridge construction that they're doing, that they started for the Panther Island project, that they did create several dead-end streets. And I find that to be unacceptable. we can't be creating dead ends. We have to make sure that when we have the easement to have a through street, that we connect the pavement. I don't like seeing the areas of isolation, so the strategy for keeping those neighborhoods connected is literally to just keep them connected. If you have to go around, add a new artery, that new artery still has to connect to those streets that it would otherwise have cut off. The strategy would be to vote no on building projects or plans that would reduce access, and to vote for building projects and plans that would increase it. Does that make sense? Oh, by the way, several questions have been answered in the Q&A. I'll point to those who haven't looked at those yet. I'm sure I still have more time. You said to keep it brief if I could. And you're on mute.
So did you have anything else to add?
I am open to suggestions from anyone else. I don't pretend to know everything about everything, and I like to take great ideas from wherever they come.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. This concludes the second round of questions in our forum. And fortunately, we are running just a little bit ahead of time, so we may have some time at the end to address some of those additional questions, because everybody's been doing such a great job at striving for greatness on the timer. For the third round of questions, we will have one question that we will ask each of you, and it's the same question for all of you. And the question is this: from time to time, the mayor appoints people to serve on boards, committees, or commissions, and from our perspective, East Fort Worth has been underrepresented in these appointments. It appears as though there are 2 or 3 people who tend to be put on every time, and the pleasure is not spread across our community in a way that makes it as representative as possible. So how would you go about identifying and recruiting new appointees for these posts so that we may have better representation for the entirety of East Fort Worth in these opportunities? And for this round, we will have 1 minute for your response. So, and this time we will be starting with Ms. Peoples. Ms. Peoples, your time starts now.
So I like to talk about equality and equity. And you got to do, everybody gets a shoe, but that's equality. But equity is when everybody, the shoe fits everybody. So Linda, this is easy. We have many people that lift their names up and apply to go on these boards and committees, and they pick the same people over and over. It needs to be rotational. People from, if we lift our names up and we're qualified, we need to have that list, and we need to go through that list and give everybody an opportunity. We have too many people who have told me I asked to be on a board and commission and I was ignored. And so I think when we start distributing that equitably among those who have indicated they want to serve, that's when you start getting real good thought.
Thank you, Ms. Peoples. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Zadeh. Ms. Zadeh, your time starts now.
So I have absolutely experienced this because I filed to serve on a board and commission years and years ago, and the council member who represented me at the time ignored my application, and so I was not appointed at that time. Thankfully, someone else, the mayor at the time, saw fit to appoint me. We absolutely need to broaden the pool from which we draw to serve on boards and commissions. The city went through a time when we were struggling to find people who were willing to serve, but that is no longer the case. And we definitely need to stop just going back to the same people every time. It has been wonderful to have available, passionate people who are willing to serve and have served for many, many years. And we're not saying to ignore those people, but we definitely need to continue to broaden the diversity of the people that serve and move that around so that it is not continuing to be the same people. And then when somebody gets done with their service on one board or commission, just shifting them to another one, because there are actually term limits on boards and commissions. So clearly reaching out, letting folks know the ability to serve and accessing those people is important.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Zadeh. Dr. Bryd, how would you respond to that question?
Diversity is so important. You know, the 2019 S&P 500 study looked at that, and ethnic and gender, and in this case, geographic diversity made those organizations better because they were better at problem solving and they had access to more markets. The same applies on our commissions. Leaders who make appointments need to track their appointments, and they have to be deliberate about finding people that they don't know, but that other people know, who would be great candidates rather than going to the same pool of people that we always do. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bryd. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Caldwell. How would you respond to that question?
So I look at what is the application process to get onto a board or commission. And I look at the city's employment application, because serving on a board or commission or serving as a city employee, either way, you're going to have some influence that you would not otherwise have. And I'd like to streamline the application. I would like to make the application process less bureaucratic. And I'd like to increase transparency in the process by making it visible how many people have applied to any given board or commission slot, any given city job posting, because frankly, if there's already 100 applicants whose applications clearly haven't been sorted through to hire or pick one of them, then you don't need to throw in another application when you're just going to be one more anonymous page on a stack of resumes. So I would want to just put in that transparency to say how many people have applied and streamline the process so that rather than having to give a 10 to 20 page background or complete history of everything you've ever done in life, just 1 to 2 pages ought to be sufficient as part of an application that you can frankly email as a PDF and call that a completed application.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. And finally, in this round, we'll hear from Ms. Parker. Ms. Parker, your time starts now.
Sure. So I'm going to use a baseball analogy because we're in Little League right now. So I think we need a better bullpen of potential members, and City Hall needs to professionalize the process. As a staff member, chief of staff, I worked with council members, quite frankly, and this may be disconcerting to hear, but sometimes council members are scrambling to make their appointment when they figure out there's a vacancy. We need to take that burden off of them and work directly with council members to understand who is qualified to serve across the city. We've started a few things that I think are the right direction. So first is the appointments project, focused on getting gender parity at City Hall and allowing more women to serve. Additionally, now we have our diversity inclusion office working with Christina Brooks. Maybe a potential solution might be to make sure her office contains that bullpen, putting a call out to folks across the community to serve on different boards and commissions, even when there's not a vacancy, you have their applications updated. So when a council member needs to fill a vacancy, you do so. And then making sure you go to the people that have served over and over again and say to them, would you be willing to pass the torch and help us find your next successor within your area of the community that may be able to take your place? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. That's our third round of questions, and we are running ahead of time. So are there questions in the Q&A that we need to, let's see. Please outline how you work. Jason, do you want to?
Linda, you've done a great job. Thank you. Let me see if I can pull out a question from the Q&A. And let me suggest, Linda, if it's all right with you, let's extend the closing statements for the candidates.
Okay.
And I am not well versed on this question, but I hope the council candidates, mayoral candidates, can inform us. There's a question about the Independent Redistricting Commission to redraw the council member map. What are your thoughts on the best way for that process to be handled, be it by the council or by an independent commission? So I'll let you turn that into something to respond to, and given our time, a minute and a half to our timers.
Okay.
Okay, and Linda, I'll let you call the order.
Okay. Let's see, who did we start with last time? Let me find my. Okay, well then this time we'll start with Ms. Zadeh.
Thank you for that question. I have been very vocal in my support for an independent redistricting commission. Back in 2016, when the voters voted to add 2 council districts after the 2020 census was completed, that discussion started to happen, and there was a lot of support for doing the redistricting with an independent redistricting commission, similarly to the way that Austin did that. So I brought some folks to the city staff to have that conversation and what that would look like. Unfortunately, the majority of the current council decided to keep it with the council making the final decisions. However, after the May 1st election, there is still time to look at doing an independent redistricting. The way our charter is written, the council would have to be the ones to actually vote on the final maps, but that does not preclude having an independent redistricting commission draw those maps. And then if we do not have an independent redistricting commission, I believe that we absolutely have to have everything done in public meetings transparently. If any changes happen to maps, that needs to be explained on the record by whoever is proposing those changes, so that all of that is transparent, above board, and folks know why those maps are the way that they are. But I would definitely support independent redistricting by an independent redistricting commission.
Thank you, Ms. Zadeh. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Bryd. Same question.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to hand over something so important to a group of people who aren't elected officials, who aren't accountable directly to the people. We can do it this way. We can do it in a way where the council votes on it, where it's 100% transparent, where we use a third party to help us draw the map or initial map/maps, and then have a very transparent process where everyone gets to have a say in how they should be drawn up. We've already done a nice job of putting a committee together to help us determine what should the metrics be for this, right? And I really liked them. They talked about minority opportunity zones. They talked about making sure we have the same number of people in each of these. And they also talked about, hey, let's make sure that we don't have one of the criteria be that the council member gets drawn in his or her district. Listen, we can do it, but that needs to be maintained in control of sitting council members, because they're elected and they're responsible to the people who have elected them.
Thank you, Dr. Bryd. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Caldwell.
So this question is very similar to a question that I answered the other day for the voter guide for the League of Women Voters. In that answer, I had to review the recommendations for the redistricting task force, where they discussed that rather than having a commission, they will have a contractor creating the map, someone hired by the city, and the guidelines created for from the task force for the contractor, half of them tend to encourage unethical gerrymandering. So as far as creating an independent districting commission, I don't trust unelected officials more than I trust elected officials. We all have our biases. I don't care who makes the maps, I care how they make the maps. I would want them to comply with the recommendation that each district be of equal size and relatively compact. I would want them to comply with the recommendation that the district should be gone regardless of where the current council members live. The redistricting task force report had 10 recommendations. I would want to follow all applicable laws plus recommendations 1, 5, 6, 7, and 10, but I reject recommendations 2 through 4, 8, and 9 because the way they're written, they encourage gerrymandering. They encourage unethical practices. So once again, I don't care who draws the maps. I care how the maps are drawn. I care about the final result, frankly, more than the process, because I want the final result to be honest, because you can, just like with statistics, you can use numbers to lie. You can use a theoretically honest process to deceive a whole lot of people. And I care more about justice than following the process. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Parker. Ms. Parker.
Sure. So I think the theme for redistricting must be transparency, communication, and access for all residents across the city. Because no matter which process you undertake, if your community broadly in every part of the city doesn't have faith in the process you undertook, in the end, you have incredibly unhappy people that don't have faith in their city government. And furthermore, you probably are most susceptible to legal challenges, which is what we all want to avoid and drag the process out. As census numbers become available this summer, to Ann's point, you'll have a new council, a new mayor. They get to decide on what format goes forward. I'm less concerned about whether it's an independent commission, a hybrid, a third party, because we know when you draw the maps, it's incredibly complicated. You use professionals, whether they're inside City Hall in the planning department, development department, or externally, to help you determine how you keep the right tracks and right neighborhoods together to keep an integrity of a district. Additionally, you're going to add 2 additional districts, which is a big deal for Fort Worth. This is monumental for us. We want to make sure we're representing across the neighborhoods. So I can only control what I'm pledging to do as mayor, which is do so transparently and with full access. Continual community meetings out and across Fort Worth, making sure that any changes that are made to our maps, everybody gets to see them multiple times. Because at the end of the day, we want residents to have faith in the districts that are drawn, that they have a say-so and who represents them at City Council.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. And now we'll hear from Ms. Peoples.
So, Linda, I'm real simple on this. We live in America. This is the greatest country in the world, and it is because the people pick their leaders. The leaders don't pick their people. We need an independent redistricting committee. And let me just tell you, I'm going to give you a great example. Wanda and Don live on the other side of the freeway. I live on this side behind Nolan. You all live on that side. I've been to your house. You're in District 8. I'm in District 4. We have common interests as Eastsiders that we have to deal with 2 different council people to pay attention. The reason we went to single member districts is so that we would have communities of interest. So now we have to go to Kelly and Carrie to talk about how we fix our neighborhood. I said it, I mean it. People should pick their leaders. We need an independent redistricting committee.
Thank you, Ms. Peoples. And now we will move on to the final summation from each candidate. And as we are doing so well on time, we will allow you 2 minutes each, and we will go in reverse alphabetical order by last name for this round. First, we will start with Ms. Zadeh. Your time starts now.
Well, thank you all very much for having us together today. These forums are getting more and more informative, and the questions that are being raised are very important. So I appreciate the opportunities to talk to more residents across this entire city as we make very important decisions for what the future of Fort Worth is going to be. I will harken back to the service that I've already provided and let you all know that I believe I am the most qualified candidate to be the next mayor of Fort Worth. I have served at the local level in roles similar to yours in my local neighborhood. I have served as a staff person to cities across the Metroplex and serving as a consultant to those cities on planning issues. I have written zoning ordinances and subdivision regulations and corridor studies and revitalization plans and historic overlays and all of the things that are the nuts and bolts of making a city run efficiently and effectively. And then I have been a resident in neighborhoods that have had to go to City Hall to advocate for the things that are in the best interest of my community. So I pledge to everyone on this call and everyone in this city that the communities in this city will have a seat at the table and will be involved in the way that we move forward in the future for Fort Worth. We have had some excellent examples in the district that I represent of all of the things that people have been talking about are missing in East Fort Worth, and all of the things that people are pledging to do across this city. And I have a track record of doing those things in District 9. And those things have not limited themselves to District 9. So the initiatives that are passionate to me, that I believe will make us a world-class city going forward, are all of the things that I will prioritize as the mayor of this city. And I encourage you all to follow me at annzadeh.com to see all those platforms in action, and we will be adding to them as we go along. So thank you again for being here today.
Thank you, Ms. Zadeh. Next, we'll move on to Ms. Peoples. Ms. Peoples?
So this is easy. I love this city, but more importantly, I know this city. People talk about we're 351 square miles. If you love this city, you know this city. I've gone north, south, east, and west. There's not one section of this city that I haven't been in. I tell everybody, I can go to the richest mansion in the morning and be in a community project in the evening reading to children. This is about caring and celebrating the contributions of everybody in this city and our city's rich diversity. We are the 12th largest city in the United States, but we run it like we're not. We run it like we're this little small city that's not worthy of attention. We are a world-class city, and we need to be expounding on the things that make us a world-class city and using those resources. And so I am running because I believe I know how to pull people together. My job as a corporate vice president for many years has taught me to value diversity and to use it. And then I love the extra benefit you get with me is I love the East Side. I'm going to be the best ambassador for the East Side ever. And I'm going to make sure that all of our citizens get treated fairly and equitably, and we build a city that we're all going to be bragging on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peoples. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Parker. Ms. Parker?
Thank y'all for having me. It's good to see everybody. I want to make it clear that I'm not running against anybody in this race. I'm really running for Fort Worth. And I do think the rest of the candidates can attest. I think we all agree with that. We've had some really wonderful forums where we're espousing our ideas and our vision for this community. I'll just remind you that for my entire career, I have really loved serving behind the scenes. I've loved being a problem solver. I didn't need credit. I didn't need my picture taken. It was about roll up your sleeves and get to know what really solutions look like. And I'm applying that same vision right now, running for mayor, and I would do the same thing as your mayor. I know that Fort Worth can be an example across this country, what it looks like to unite a community in a nonpartisan, non-divisive way, despite what you're seeing, all the craziness across the United States, and let Fort Worth be that example. But I think we have to have a lot of tenacity and a lot of grit to get it done. We have to focus on economic development, both small business entrepreneurship and corporate relocation. We have to partner with our school districts, our charter schools, our private schools, our homeschool families, because every child must have access to a quality education if we have any hope of having a real future here in Fort Worth, Texas. When you think about the City Hall efficiencies, I want City Hall to be a get to yes place. A place where our businesses find themselves wishing they could hire our employees because they have that same client-facing approach to every beat of business. And I don't care if you're paying your water bill or you're coming downtown to talk about a $500 million development. You need to be treated with respect and regard. And quite frankly, we have fantastic employees at the City of Fort Worth. I was one for 5 years, and I want to see them empowered. And lastly, I'll just say this is not a concept about being inclusive. If we want Fort Worth to be successful, we have to put more people at our table. We have to care about every single neighborhood in this community. And as someone that's raising young children right now in Fort Worth, I'm incredibly invested in what that looks like. And again, thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Caldwell.
Well, I will start off with agreeing that I'm here to collaborate with others, not to compete against them. I am also not someone trying to force my agenda on other people. I want to be receptive and listen to the bright ideas, the suggestions, the recommendations, the requests for support that our residents, our constituents bring to us. In the Q&A, I have responded to the majority of the questions. I haven't been able to get to all of them, which I think makes me stand out and demonstrates my intention to be responsive to the concerns and needs that members of the public want to bring to us. As far as partisanship, I've been a delegate to both the Republican and Democrat state conventions in 2018 and 2020. I have friends on both sides of the aisle. And I'm a mix. I'm not a moderate, I'm a mix. But in terms of trying to take care of the city's priorities, our first priority does have to be addressing basic needs, utilities, public safety, providing a clean and healthy environment. Our second has to be managing taxpayer money, the budget, being good stewards of the available resources to us. And using the model protect it, improve it, pass it on, we do need to improve on the communities around us and pass on a brighter legacy and future to the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. And now we'll hear from Dr. Bryd. Dr. Bryd.
This is another great forum. Thank you, everybody who put this on and the organization of it, and the questions, and the fellow candidates for being on. We have a great city. We have such a great city. I just love it. And being on city council has just been the greatest honor of my life. I've just loved it. East Fort Worth needs to be part of it all the way, 100%. And to do that, we have to be deliberate, right? The mayor has to be intentional about who is included in the kitchen cabinet for East Fort. Make sure that there's somebody from East Fort Worth that is advocating for what's going on over here. And then look, I'm an entrepreneur. That's where my real love, and before I was an elected official, we got to get creative about it, right? I mean, let's create a new award for somebody who creates a successful business, you know, that the Fort Worth Chamber awards once a year, successful business on the east side, or some kind of criteria, or multiple awards. Let's hire a singer to write a song about East Fort Worth. I know I'm getting kind of crazy now, but heck, I'll sing it, right? We'll put it on YouTube. We'll all have fun with it. You know, let's have these kind of creative ideas, because it's wonderful. That's how we were successful in hospice care. And that's how we can be successful with every single part of our city. But it takes energy. It takes being deliberate. It takes an entrepreneurial mindset. It takes a customer service friendly city hall, which we've got to have and we've got to do better on. And then it takes energy, and then it takes somebody who loves our city. Thanks again for having me on.
Thank you, Dr. Bryd. This concludes all of our questions for our candidates, and I'll turn it over now to Jason Ray.
Thank you, Linda. Linda, great job. Thank you so much for organizing this and cracking the timekeeper whip. And you gave us a very productive hour with these candidates. And I think I speak for the group. The future of Fort Worth, coming off a 10-year mayor, is in good hands. I feel very confident about how this election is going to turn out. And so thank you, candidates, for taking the time today. We look forward to following up with you. We look forward to supporting you, whoever wins that race, and being a part of your plan to move Fort Worth forward, and especially East Fort Worth. To our members and guests, thank you. This is why we have the East Fort Worth Business Association, to come together, sometimes virtually, soon to be in person, but to exchange ideas, information, build relationships, and then turn that into things that are good for Fort Worth and East Fort Worth. So thanks, everyone. We'll be back together the first Thursday in May. Look for more details about that meeting, perhaps details about that meeting being in person. We'll be able to talk about the election on May 1st and how that worked out well, whatever that outcome was. So thank you, Linda and committee, for a great forum, everyone for being online, and we will see you next month. Bye-bye.